Hey guys, so Scream 6 is finally coming out this weekend, and for the next few days, I'm going to be reviewing all 5 of the previous installments in this franchise, which is one of my favorite horror franchises. And today we're talking about the one that started it all, Scream from 1996, which introduces us to Sidney Prescott, a girl who experienced the murder of her mother 1 year earlier and still trying to come to terms with it. But now a new killer is terrorizing her hometown of Woodsboro using horror films as part of a sadistic game. And I've told you guys before what I think about the horror genre, that when it's done well, it can be amazing. But it's often a genre that I have a lot of issues with. But what I appreciate about Scream is that it doesn't really take itself too seriously. And Wes Craven adds quite a bit of wit and fun that at the time was new for slasher films and is actually kind of refreshing looking back, as now we've gotten even more slasher films that do take themselves a bit too seriously. And I'll talk about that more later. One of the greatest successes of this film is that it actually succeeds as a character film. You get these characters in this world that has a surprising amount of depth to it, especially with the character of Sidney Prescott, which Neve Campbell gives a great performance for. And Sidney is just one of the iconic final girls in horror cinematic history. When you use that title for a character, they're not really that developed. But when I saw this film for the first time, I was surprised how much time was actually given to developing this storyline with her mother and her accusing this man Cotton Weary of being the murderer, and her relationship with this TV reporter Gail Weathers, and how Gail spread a lot of rumors about her mother, and there's a lot of tension between those characters. And when these new killings start happening, all these tensions rise to the surface again, and Sidney has to actually question herself because her mother wasn't the best person, and she has to listen to how people react to that event being brought up again and how people view her, and she has to wonder if she's really gonna become no better. Like I said, I still remember when I saw this film for the first time, and I was just shocked at how compelling all that actually was. But there's also some fun side characters like Dewey and Gail, which have this fun, flirtatious back and forth with each other, which I've heard online that for some people their eventual romance doesn't make too much sense. And I can kind of get that. You can look at Dewey and you can say that, wow, Gale is so out of his league. But just something about the way these two actors interact with each other. There's so much chemistry there, and there's a sense of adorkability, I would say. And it is kind of interesting how their romance progresses, because at first Gale is just using Dewey to get more information about the killings, get closer to crime scenes. But then as the film goes on, there's actually a genuine interest in each other. And then that brings me to one of my favorite characters of this entire franchise, that being Randy. And this is a character that I would love to see my friends' reaction to, because I can kind of picture how my friends see me as a film buff. Because he's just this exaggerated version of a film buff. That he's a friend that I would want to have, but also it would just be fun if my friends ever saw this and be like, hey, Brett, what are you doing in a movie? But even when you get to like the principal of the Woodsboro High School, and even he has like a scene or two that stands out.
You're both expelled. Get out.
Oh, come on, Mr. Himbry. It was just a joke.
That's not fair. You're absolutely right. It is not fair. Fairness would be to rip your insides out, hang you from a tree so we can expose you for the heartless, desensitized little shit that you are.
And rewatching this film, I was surprised at how large of chunks there were where there really wasn't much killing. Of course, there's some creative kills like the garage and the TV falling on top of Matthew Lillard at the end. But this film is not just interested in slashing people up. It's interested in building people up that you want to see survive and that are really fun to be around. Of course, something that you have to talk about within this franchise is the satire, which is very clever. This film touches on a lot of horror film cliches, as well as commenting on just film in general, Of course, you have the iconic scene of all the teens just sitting on a couch watching Halloween, and then Randy just breaks out into discussing the rules of horror films, and it's such a funny scene.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex.
Of course, Wes Craven also started the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and apparently he really didn't enjoy where all the sequels went.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Is that the one where the guy had knives for fingers?
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Well, the first one was, but the rest sucked.
And also, one of the common things that gets criticized in horror is the use of jump scares. And of course, this film wouldn't be complete if Wes Craven didn't make fun of those. There are so many false scares in this film that it really does become comedic. You get the iconic killer in Ghostface, which I love the voice, I love the line.
What's your favorite scary movie?
And like all great killers, Ghostface is given a great intro that's well shot, which is something else that Craven does really well, directing scenes. And the opening where you're just seeing Drew Barrymore walk around her house and the camera just follows her, and you just hear how this conversation starts out well and then it gets creepier and creepier. And without question, it was just an iconic way to introduce this killer. But what I also appreciate about this killer is that Ghostface is really clumsy, which makes sense. That Ghostface isn't a professional killer. That anyone can just put on the costume and be this terrifying force. But what adds to the fun is that there are a lot of points where Ghostface trips on something or gets a fridge door to the face, and it just adds to the fun. And it adds a kind of like a slapstick vibe to the film that I appreciated. And the film ends on a really well-crafted plot twist, where not only is it revealed that Billy Loomis killed Sidney's mother because she was sleeping with his father, but you also get the aspect where Ghostface was 2 killers in the movie. Also Matthew Lillard's character. But this ending works especially well with how Billy Loomis was set up, that at the beginning where he's accused of these murders and he gets arrested and Sidney questions him for a while, it sets up this character that you think, okay, because they're putting so much focus on him at the beginning, he can't be the killer. You can't help but think, because of the way the film is structured, that the possibility of him being the killer introduced so soon, that it would actually be true. It was a really good diversion. And it also added more meat to his relationship with Sidney, that they're not just the couple in a horror movie, which for a while they seemed to be, and I was just kind of neutral on their relationship. It was fine. It was nothing to write home about. But adding this plot twist, it just made their connection more personal. But this ending is also where I have a couple of my issues. And in particular, I think this movie struggles with tone a bit. The end is supposed to be very serious. You get that reveal from Billy Loomis about his dad, and it looks like him and Matthew Lillard's character are going to kill Sidney's father. And it's all building up stakes, and it's meant to be very tense. But then you get this really absurd performance from Matthew Lillard, who is really great in the movie. But it was just a moment where I thought they could have either went more comedic or more serious, but they kind of tried to do both, and it didn't quite work. And it's not the only place in the film like that. There's a lot of other points where a moment is trying to be a bit more dramatic, and then something meta happens. I still loved it. But it was certainly not the best way to transition between tones. But in the end, I can absolutely see why this film has a legacy. It's a slasher movie that really proves that slasher movies can be more. It proved that they can actually be quality films, and this first one kicked off, like I said, one of my favorite horror franchises of all time. I'm going to give Scream an A-. Trying to come up with what I would end this video on, I just realized the thing I just needed to do, just the thing that made sense, is just the question,
What's your favorite scary movie?
Comment that down below in the comment section, and I'll see you next time.